They don't fear evil. They fear the fool who follows it without question. Because evil is predictable. But stupidity with conviction? That's chaos wearing a mask of virtue. And it's far more dangerous than a villain with a plan. Let me ask you something brutal, something most people spend their lives avoiding. Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone who isn't evil, isn't cruel, isn't hateful, but still destroys everything they touch? They smile while they vote for corruption. They cheer while truth is crucified. They believe they're good, while they bury the world beneath their ignorance. That's what Dietrich Bonhoeffer saw. A German theologian. A resistance fighter. A man who tried to stop Hitler and paid with his life. But before they hanged him, he left behind something far more dangerous than any bullet. A theory. A theory so terrifying, so brutally honest, so damning, that even today few dare to say it out loud. He said the real threat to humanity isn't malice. Stupidity. And the worst part? Stupidity isn't a lack of intelligence. It's a spiritual corruption. A willing blindness. A virus of the mind that turns ordinary people into loyal foot soldiers of madness. And here's the part that should rattle your bones. The stupid don't know they're stupid. They think they're virtuous. They think they're awake. But you've seen it, haven't you? That coworker who parrots opinions they don't understand. That friend who attacks truth because it feels wrong. That mob online screaming for justice while unknowingly serving power. And you wonder how the hell they can't see it. You think, maybe if I explain it better, maybe if I just show them the facts. But nothing changes. Because you're not arguing with logic. You're arguing with possession. Bonhoeffer said stupidity is not an intellectual defect. It's a moral one. And that, right there, is the forbidden truth. One that will shatter everything you thought you understood about the world, about people, and about your own damn survival. Because once you truly see this, you'll never be manipulated the same way again. You'll never waste your time in fruitless debates with the blind. And you'll finally understand why history keeps repeating. With different names, same ruin. Let me take you deeper. Picture this. It's 1933, Germany. A civilized, educated nation. Home of Bach, Beethoven, Kant, Goethe. A nation of thinkers. And yet, almost overnight, it descends into unthinkable darkness. The Nazis didn't just rise with guns. They rose with the help of everyday people. Teachers, doctors, shopkeepers, pastors. People who genuinely believed they were doing good. Oh, because of the terrifying mechanism Bonhoeffer exposed. When stupidity takes root, not as a lack of IQ but as surrender of thought, people become incapable of moral judgment. They don't see facts. They see tribe. They don't seek truth. They seek comfort. They hand over their ability to think, in exchange for the feeling of belonging. And once they do, you can't reach them with reason anymore. Because they've outsourced their soul. You're not talking to a human anymore. You're talking to a system. A reflex. A puppet wired to a narrative that someone else controls. And here's where it gets darker. Stupidity thrives under certain conditions. Not in freedom, but in submission. Bonhoeffer said, powerful stupidity emerges not in solitude but in groups. It's a social infection. It happens when people stop thinking for themselves, out of fear, out of laziness, or out of loyalty. Let that sink in. The moment a person trades their thinking for a collective identity, they become a conduit for destruction. And they don't even know it. That's why stupid people always seem so confident, so certain, so loud. Because their confidence isn't rooted in truth. It's inflated by the echo of the mob behind them. And here's the most disturbing twist. The smarter you are, the more dangerous these people become to you. What? Because you become a threat. You question. You disrupt the narrative. You make them feel the thing they fear most. Discomfort. So they attack. Not because they understand what you're saying, but because they've been conditioned to destroy anything that doesn't fit their script. This is why intelligent, conscious individuals often feel alienated. Not because you're wrong, but because you're surrounded by people who've stopped thinking. And let's be real. If you try to wake them up, you become the villain in their story. You felt it, haven't you? The isolation. The moments when you realize the people around you would rather be comfortable than conscious. Bonhoeffer's warning wasn't just about stupidity. It was about what stupidity defends. Evil doesn't need to be smart. It just needs loyal idiots. And in every corrupt system, they're the foot soldiers. The enforcers. The ones who chant slogans they don't understand, destroy lives they've never questioned, and kneel to ideas that poison them. And they do it all with a smile. Because they think they're saving the world. Now listen carefully. You can't fix them. You can't argue with them. You can't enlighten them with facts. Because stupidity, once it becomes moralized, isn't a lack of information. It's a defense against transformation. You're not here to save them. You're here to outthink the system that raised them. And in a world on fire with shallow outrage and blind allegiance, that makes you dangerous. So the real question isn't, how do I convince the stupid? The real question is, how do I evolve beyond them without being devoured by them? Because once you become aware of this terrifying truth, you face a new kind of war. Not of bullets, not of bombs, but of clarity versus chaos. And if you're not ready, you will be swallowed whole by the crowd that calls its ignorance virtue. But if you're willing to see what most people can't, to train your perception, sharpen your discernment, and become immune to mass stupidity, then what comes next will change everything. Because now we step beyond theory, into tactics, into the real machinery behind how this stupidity spreads, and how those in power use it like a weapon. You're about to see what Bonhoeffer saw, but deeper, darker, and far more useful for the war you're already living in. Let's go deeper. Because stupidity isn't born. It's bred. Carefully. Systematically. Deliberately. You were never meant to hear this. But stupidity is a tool. A tool used by power to protect itself from people like you. Let me explain what they don't want you to figure out. Smart people ask questions. Smart people rebel. Smart people destroy illusions. And that makes them dangerous. So how do you make a population obedient without the chains? You don't beat them. You numb them. You distract them. You make them feel righteous while feeding them lies. And when that doesn't work, you isolate the thinkers. You ridicule the questioners. You make rebellion look insane, and stupidity look like virtue. This is the real machinery of control. The manufacture of blind masses. The mass production of conviction without comprehension. Because it's not the dictator's gun that enslaves you. It's your neighbor's blind obedience to a lie. That's what Bonhoeffer saw. He watched good people become silent. He watched the thinkers disappear. And he watched ordinary, cheerful, smiling citizens transform into carriers of death. All because they outsourced their thinking. And then defended that decision with moral certainty. But how is that possible? How does one become stupid with such passion? Here's the forbidden blueprint. First, overload the system. Fill every channel, every screen, every feed, every billboard with noise. Opinions. Outrage. Fake choices. Manufactured enemies. You know the game. Argue about identity. Fight over labels. Distract from the decay beneath the surface. Second, inject moral confusion. Blur the line between good and evil. Make cruelty look kind. Make truth look hateful. Make doubt look dangerous. Then flood the mind with artificial clarity. Slogans. Hashtags. Sound bites. So shallow you can swallow them without chewing. So seductive you forget how to think. Now here's where it turns surgical. Train the population to associate intelligence with arrogance. Make thinking feel like betrayal. Make conformity feel like compassion. And the result? An army of moral puppets. Stupid not because they lack neurons, but because they've handed their cognition to a tribe. They feel smart because everyone around them agrees. But they're not thinking. They're mirroring. This isn't incompetence. It's engineered ignorance. And it's designed for one purpose. To silence people like you. Because when you speak up, when you say, wait, that doesn't make sense. When you question the narrative, they don't just disagree. They attack. Not because they understand what they're defending, but because the system trained them to treat nonconformity as violence. And that is the terrifying heart of Bonhoeffer's theory. He wasn't saying that stupid people are harmless. He was saying they are the most obedient to harm. Because they believe. And that belief, when it's divorced from reality, becomes a weapon wielded by those who don't even realize they're holding it. And here's where things get even darker. You've met these people. You've worked beside them. You've tried to love them. And maybe you've realized something horrifying. You can't reach them. Because they don't want truth. They want peace. They want safety. They want the illusion of control. And you? You threaten that. Your awareness burns their comfort. Your clarity exposes their delusion. So they cast you out. They mock your mind. They say you're too intense, too negative, too paranoid. But here's the truth. You are not paranoid. You are not overthinking. You are seeing clearly. And they can't handle that. Because to wake up would mean tearing down everything they've built their identity on. And most people would rather die than change their minds. So here's what you must understand. You are not here to save the herd. You are here to master yourself. Because if you don't, you will drown in a sea of noise. A sea of stupidity that masquerades as goodness. A sea of smiling assassins who destroy freedom in the name of virtue. But you have something they don't. You have the ability to step back, to observe the infection, to detect the pattern. And that makes you dangerous. So sharpen it. Because this world is a battlefield of perception. And every day you are being hunted, not with guns but with narratives. Let me give you an example. Think of every empire that fell. Rome, the Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, even modern-day corporate empires. They didn't collapse overnight. They rotted from within. Not from a lack of resources but from a lack of clarity. They drowned in a flood of noise, obedience, and shallow virtue. The thinkers were silenced. The loyalists took over. And by the time the truth came back, it was too late to save them. History is not a warning. It's a cycle. And the only ones who survive it are the ones who see the stupidity before it becomes law. You must become one of them. Because the system you're in right now is doing everything it can to make you stupid. To distract you. To sedate you. To make you trade truth for convenience, clarity for comfort. But if you resist it, if you stay conscious, stay awake, stay sharp, you don't just survive. You dominate. Because when everyone else is blind, the one who sees rules. But that kind of vision doesn't come easy. You have to train it. And that's where we go next. Because Bonhoeffer didn't just diagnose the problem. He hinted at the cure. A way to become immune to stupidity. A way to build a mind that cannot be manipulated, no matter how loud the mob gets. You're about to learn how to build that mind. And once you do, you'll never fear stupidity again. You'll use it, control it, outmaneuver it. Because the strategist doesn't argue with the infected. He builds immunity. Then, he builds empires. There comes a moment in every war where you stop asking questions. And you start sharpening your blade. This is that moment. Because now you understand what stupidity is. Now you see how it spreads. But knowledge without transformation is just more noise. The question is, how do you become untouchable, uninfected, unstoppable? You build a mind that cannot be captured. And the first rule? Stop trying to wake up those who chose sleep. You've wasted too many hours explaining reality to people who are allergic to it. You've bled truth into ears that were never meant to hear it. You've carried the emotional weight of others' blindness. But that ends now. Because the more time you spend trying to rescue the blind, the less time you have to refine your own vision. Bonhoeffer understood this. He didn't waste his final days arguing with the infected. He didn't shout into the void. He planned. He studied. He resisted. Not with emotion, but with strategy. That's what you need now. A psychological immunity. Because stupidity only thrives when you allow it into your space. Into your attention, your energy, your emotional bandwidth. So here's the first transformation. Withdraw your light from the hollow. Don't explain yourself to people who mock intelligence. Don't hand truth to those who spit it back as arrogance. Don't try to educate the loyal foot soldiers of decay. You are not their savior. You are their mirror. And mirrors don't speak. They reflect. Second, silence the flood. Turn off the noise. You know what I'm talking about. The endless scroll. The outrage cycles. The algorithmic venom designed to keep you reactive. You think it's just entertainment. It's not. It's anesthesia. A dopamine drip distraction keeping your awareness dulled just enough that you forget the war you're actually in. But once you kill the noise, something terrifying happens. Silence. Stillness. Self. And this is where most people run. Because without the chaos, they're left alone with their own untrained minds. Their own unfaced fears. Their own unfiltered truths. But not you. Because now you know the truth. Stupidity isn't just around you. It's in you. And if you don't confront it, it will control you. It's every automatic reaction you never questioned. Every belief you never chose. Every emotion hijacked by a system you didn't design. So the third transformation? Mental sovereignty. That means you question everything, even your own certainties. Especially your own certainties. Because the most dangerous kind of stupidity isn't loud. It's subtle. It sounds like your voice. It hides in your comfort. It dresses up as, that's just the way I am. But you are not a fixed identity. You are an evolving weapon. So dismantle the parts of you that parrot. Burn the scripts that were installed without consent. Tear apart every truth you were handed by people who never earned your trust. Only then do you start thinking. Bonhoeffer didn't just warn us about stupidity. He gave us the path to transcend it. Responsibility. Not for the world, but for the state of your own perception. He said, the ultimate test of a moral society is the kind of world that it leaves to its children. But that world isn't just built with votes or violence. It's built with perception. You want to leave behind something powerful? Start by becoming the one mind in a collapsing culture that cannot be manipulated. Because the most dangerous person in any system is the one who still thinks. And when you think at this level, not reactively but surgically, you start to see patterns others don't. You start to anticipate moves before they're made. You start to dominate conversations without even raising your voice. Because you're no longer speaking to the mob. You're playing above it. And here's where the transformation completes. You stop trying to be understood. And you start building in silence. You stop arguing. And you start attracting. You stop reacting to the madness. And you start moving through it like a shadow with a sword. That's when you become immune. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You rewired your mind. You rejected the infection. You stood alone long enough to become untouchable. And now, you don't just survive the stupidity, you exploit it. Because while the masses are chanting their newest slogans, while they rage at shadows and defend systems that poison them, you see it for what it is, a game. And games are meant to be mastered. The fool thinks it's real. The blind think it's truth. But you read the code. You move through the matrix. You use the chaos to sharpen your clarity. And that's the final evolution Bonhoeffer never lived to write. But you are living it now. The moment you stop reacting to the stupid and start constructing your own mental fortress is the moment you begin to rise. Silently, strategically, unstoppably. And now, you're ready for the final piece. Because this story doesn't end with survival. It ends with power. You've burned the illusions. You've faced the silence. You've forged a sovereign mind. Now it's time to use it. To carve a path no one can block, no mob can touch, no stupid system can contain. But there's one more revelation. One final truth. The most forbidden of all. And once you hear it, there's no going back. You've come this far. Through fire. Through noise. Through darkness. And now you're standing on the edge of a revelation so raw, so forbidden, that most minds will never be allowed near it. Because this is where you stop being a thinker and become something far more dangerous. A seer. You see now, don't you? Stupidity isn't an absence of intelligence. It's a suppression of consciousness. It's a choice, made easier by a system designed to reward blindness. And what's worse, that system was built to feel good. Stupidity feels safe. It feels warm. It feels like unity. It feels like belonging. It's seductive. Not because it's true, but because it removes the burden of truth. It's far easier to chant than to question. Easier to follow than to stand. Easier to numb than to see. But what happens when you do see? When the veil rips. When the slogans dissolve. When the smiling masses begin to look like possessed puppets, clapping for their own decay. What happens? When you realize you were never meant to fit into this world. Because this world isn't designed for clarity. It's built for compliance. You want to know the real reason they fear intelligence? Because intelligence leads to solitude. And solitude leads to strength. And strength leads to revolution. Not the kind with guns and flags, but the kind that starts inside. When you stop needing permission. When you stop needing the crowd. When you stop apologizing for being awake in a world that's asleep on purpose. That's the revolution they can't survive. A sovereign mind, in a sea of submission, is the most violent threat to any empire. And that's you now. You are no longer prey. You are not a product. You are not another brick in their cathedral of illusion. You are the ghost in their machine. The glitch they can't trace. The virus of awareness infecting their mindless comfort. And here's the final truth. The one Bonhoeffer knew but didn't get to scream loud enough. The stupid are not your enemy. Your real enemy is the part of you that ever wanted to join them. The part that wanted to be liked more than it wanted to be true. The part that dimmed your insight just to feel safe. The part that knew something was off, but chose the comfort of the crowd over the agony of seeing. That part must die. Today. Because clarity is not kind. Truth is not soft. And awakening is not romantic. It's brutal. It's violent. It's lonely. But it's also liberation. When you finally stop trying to explain yourself to the blind. When you stop throwing pearls at the mouth of wolves. When you stop offering insight to a world that punishes perception. You become untouchable. They may call you cold. Let them. They may call you arrogant. Good. They may call you dangerous. They're finally right. Because you don't walk through this world hoping to be understood. You walk through it like a storm, disrupting every lie your presence exposes. You don't scream. You see. You don't convince. You conquer. And while they play in the shallows of shallow intellect, you dive to depths where truth is forged in silence and pain. That's where the real ones live. The ones who see the infection and don't run. The ones who watch the world praise stupidity and don't bow. The ones who burn the false self and rise. So here you are, at the end. Or maybe, the beginning. Because this was never just a theory. It was a weapon. Now it's in your hands. What you do with it will define your rise or your collapse. But if you've made it this far, I already know the answer. You're not like them. You never were. You never will be. And that's why you were never meant to hear this. Because once you do, you can never go back. The illusion is dead. And you have become immune. You don't just survive stupidity. You weaponize it. You outthink it. You move through it like a ghost no one can catch. Because you see the strings. And those who see the strings eventually pull them. Now, pull yours. Comment what woke you up. Like this if your mind is sharper now. Subscribe if you're ready to dominate a world built on blind obedience. And remember, you are no longer a citizen of the noise. You are a strategist of silence, a sovereign of thought, a master of the unseen war. And they will never see you coming.